Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Quote for today is: there are disasters that are entirely man-made, but none that are entirely natural. Today, the topic of my presentation is man-made disasters and bioterrorism, and I am presenting it under the supervision of my professor, Dr. Saira Afzal. Learning outlines of the presentation are introduction to man-made disasters, its classification, biological disasters, chemical disaster, oil spillage and forest fire, bioterrorism, and MCQs at the end. By the end of this presentation, participants will be able to describe what are man-made disasters and its classifications, biological disasters, chemical disasters, oil spillage, forest fires, and bioterrorism. Now, what is man-made disasters? Anthropogenic hazards, a disastrous event that is caused directly or principally by one or more identifiably deliberate or negligible human actions. Man-made disasters are the results of human intent, error, or as a result of failed system. They are intentionally or unintentionally done. All kinds of man-made disasters affect persons' mental, physical, and social well-being. Mainly, they affect loss of life, damage to nation's economy, social disruptions, long-term damage, and widespread effect, for example, nuclear explosions. Causes and main reasons of man-made disasters. First is ignorance, then carelessness, unawareness, illiteracy, strikes, human error, tourism, terrorism, vandalism, weapons, water and sewage overflow, and chemicals. However, the following factors that contribute to the inevitability of man-made disasters. First is the size and population densities of the cities, that is overcrowding, intensive utilization of rapid forms of mass transport, poorly organized emergency services, lack of warning to people, use of high technology source of energy, and increasing pressure to mine fossil fuel. Man-made disasters can be classified in three ways: technological, industrial, and warfare. In technological, there is biological disaster, building collapse, forest fires, road accidents, and aviation disaster. In industrial, there is chemical oil spills, chemical disaster, nuclear and radioactive disaster. And in warfare, it's war, civil, and conflicts. Now, biological disaster. The devastating effects caused by an enormous spread of a certain kind of living organism that may spread disease, virus, or infestation of plant, animal, or insect life on an epidemic or pandemic level. Epidemic level indicates a disaster that affects many people in a given area or community, while pandemic level indicates a disaster that affects much larger region, sometimes an entire continent or even the whole planet. For example, the recent COVID-19, H1N1, or swine flu pandemic. Biological disaster classification. The US Center for Disease Control classifies biohazards into four biosafety levels. Biosafety level 1 is bacteria and viruses that including Bacillus subtilis, some cell cultures, canine hepatitis, and non-infectious bacteria. Protection is only facial protection and gloves. While level 2 is bacteria and viruses that can only cause mild disease to human or are difficult to contract via aerosol in a lab setting such as Hep A, B, C, mumps, measles, HIV, etc. Protection and the use of autoclaves for sterilizing and biological safety cabinets are done. In biosafety level 3, bacteria and viruses that cause severe to fatal disease in human, for example, West Nile virus, anthrax, MERS, coronavirus. Protection from these are stringent safety protocols such as the use of respirators to prevent airborne infection. Biosafety level 4 is potentially fatal to human beings. Viruses like Ebola, Marburg, Lassa virus, etc. And protection is the use of positive pressure personal unit suite with a segregated air supply. Now, prevention of biological disasters, it can be done. Prevention includes the following measures that should be taken before preventive, during and after outbreak. Environmental management is safe water supply, proper maintenance of sewage pipelines to prevent waterborne diseases such as cholera, typhoid, hepatitis, dysentery, etc. Awareness of personal hygiene and provision for washing, cleaning, avoiding overcrowding, etc., and vector control. Post-disaster epidemics prevention. The risk of epidemics is increased after any biological disaster. Integrated disease surveillance system monitors the sources, modes of diseases spreading, and investigates the epidemics. Nuclear and radiation accidents. An event involving a significant release of radioactivity to the environment or a reactor a core meltdown which leads to the major undesirable consequences to people, the environment, or the facility. A nuclear or radiation accident is defined by the International Atomic Energy Agency as an event that has led to significant consequences to people, the environment, or the facility. Examples include lethal effects to the individuals, large radioactivity released to the environment, reactor core melt. This picture shows the disaster that was caused by the Fukushima nuclear event that happened in 2011. Following the 2011 Japanese Fukushima nuclear disaster, authorities shut down the nation's 54 nuclear power plant. As of 2013, the Fukushima site remains radioactive, with some 160,000 evacuees still living in temporary housing. Although nobody has died or is expected to die from radiation effects, the difficult cleanup job will take 40 or more years and cost tens of billions of dollars. Atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The United States detonated two nuclear weapons over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on 6th and 9th August 1945, respectively, during World War II. The two bombings killed between 129,000 and 226,000 people, most of whom were civilians, and remain the only use of nuclear weapons in armed conflict. An increase in leukemia appeared about 2 years after the attack and peaked around 4 to 6 years later. The Radiation Effects Research Foundation estimates the attributable risk of leukemia to be 46% for bomb victims. A chemical disaster. A chemical incident is the uncontrolled release of a toxic substance, potentially resulting in harm to public health and environment. Chemical incidents can occur as a result of natural events or as a result of accidental or international events. These incidents can be sudden or acute or have a slow onset when there is a silent release of a chemical. They can also range from small release to full-scale major emergencies. Now, Bhopal gas tragedy. The most dangerous chemical event recorded in the history was in 1984, a Bhopal gas tragedy that happened in India, in which more than 3,000 people died after a high toxic vapor, methyl isocyanate, that was released at a Union Carbide pesticide factory. Precautions from these are industries using harmful and powerful chemicals should be located far away from residential areas. There should be a survey to keep a check on their activity. The government should formulate an emergency plan to, in case of an accident, pollution levels should be checked and maintained. And oil and chemical spills. An oil and chemical spill is one of the most devastating environmental disasters that can happen because it affects people, animal, land, and the coastal waterways. They can kill wildlife, destroy habitat, and contaminate critical resources in the food chain. They can also wreak havoc on the economics of coastal communities by forcing the closure of fisheries, driving away tourists, or temporarily shutting down navigation routes. And these environmental and economic damages can linger for decades. Oil spill hazards. Oil floats on salt water and usually floats on the fresh water. Oil usually spreads out rapidly across the water surface to form a thin layer that we can all call an oil slick. As the spreading process continues, the layer becomes thinner and thinner, finally becoming a very thin layer called a sheen, which often looks like a rainbow. Depending on the circumstances, oil spill can be very harmful to marine birds and mammals and can also cause harm fish and shellfish because it destroys the insulating ability of fur-bearing mammals. An example is deep water horizon oil spill Gulf of Mexico. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill was an industrial disaster that began on 20th April in the Gulf of Mexico. The US federal government estimated the total discharge at 780,000 millimeter cube. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill is regarded as one of the largest environmental disasters in American history. Structural collapse. Structural collapse are often caused by engineering failure. Sudden fall down or cave in any type of structure due to various natural reasons and artificial reasons is called structural collapse, such as building collapse, bridge collapse, dam failure, balcony collapse, etc. Building collapse. The causes of building collapse are bad design, faulty construction, foundation failure, extraordinary load, unexpected failure mode, and combination of causes. Now, immediate action that can be taken to prevent the building collapse is check for injuries and administer first aid. Do not move seriously injured individuals. Communicate number and identify of missing persons to emergency services. And do not enter damaged, unstable building to search for missing persons. Prevention and remedies may be always hire professionals for building design and construction work. Managing material when building any high rising structure, don't manage. Use right amount and good quality material. Understanding reinforcement foundation, an excellent structure won't sit on a faulty foundation. Using the right steel, there's a big difference between 8, 10, 12 mm, etc. That professional knows. An example is the collapse of World Trade Center. This occurred during the terrorist attack of September 11, 2001, after the Twin Towers were struck by two hijacked commercial airliners. A total of 2,763 people were killed in the crashes, fires, and subsequent collapses. That includes about 2,000 civilians, 340 firefighters, and 71 law enforcement officers. Now, forest fire. The most common hazard in the forest is the forest fire. They pose a threat not only to the forest wealth but also to the entire regime, to fauna and flora, seriously disturbing the biodiversity and ecology and environment of a region. During summer, when there is no rain for months, the forests become littered with dry leaves and twigs, which could burst into flames ignited by the slightest spark. Effects of forest fires are the loss of valuable timber resources, loss of biodiversity and extinction of plants and animals, loss of wildlife habitat and depletion of wildlife, loss of natural regeneration and reduction in forest cover, global warming, loss of carbon sink resources, and increase in the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, bioterrorism. Bioterrorism is the deliberate release of virus, bacteria, toxins, or harmful agents to cause illness or death in the people, animals, or plants. Biological agents can be spread through air, water, or in food. Some bioterrorism agents, like smallpox virus, can be spread from person to person, and some, like anthrax, cannot. Bioterrorism may be favored because biological agents are relatively easy and inexpensive to obtain, can be easily disseminated, and can cause widespread fear and panic beyond the actual physical damage. A biological weapon is useful to terrorists mainly as a method of creating mass panic and disruption to a state or the country. An example of bioterrorism is smallpox. In 1980, WHO announced the eradication of smallpox, a highly contagious and incurable disease. Although the disease has been eliminated in the wild, frozen stock of smallpox are still maintained by the government of the United States and Russia. Since vaccination programs are now terminated, the world population is more susceptible to smallpox than ever before. Now, anthrax. Anthrax has been used as a weapon around the world for nearly a century. In 2001, powered anthrax spores were deliberately put into letters that were mailed through US postal system. Classification of bioweapons. These high priority agents pose a risk to national security, can be easily transmitted and disseminated. Examples are SARS-CoV, anthrax, smallpox, botulinum toxin, bubonic plague, and viral hemorrhagic fever. In the category B comes the brucellosis, epsilon toxins, food safety threats, and glanders. In category C, agents are emerging pathogens that might be engineered for mass dissemination because of their availability, ease of production and dissemination, high mortality rate, or ability to cause a major health impact. Examples are Nipah virus and hantavirus. Emergency preparedness and response is before a biological threat. A biological attack may or may not be immediately obvious. We should build an emergency supply kit, make a family emergency plan, check with the doctors to make sure everyone in the family has up to date immunization. During a threat, watch TV, listen to the radio, or check the internet for official news and information. That includes signs and symptoms of the disease, areas in danger, if medication or vaccinations are being distributed, and where to seek medical attention if you become ill. And after a biological threat, pay close attention to all official warnings and instructions on how to proceed. Medical services for biological event may be handled differently due to increased demand. The basic procedures and medical protocols for handling exposure to biological events are the same as for any infectious disease. Uh, Now, recent updates. An article recently published is Current and Developing Technologies for Monitoring Agents of Bioterrorism and Biowarfare. This shows that because bioterrorism is difficult to predict or prevent, reliable platforms to rapidly detect and identify biothreats agents are important to minimize the spread of these agents and to protect the public health. These platforms must not only be sensitive and specific, but must also be accurately detect a variety of pathogens, including modified or previously uncharacterized agents, directly from complex sample matrices. Another article is about COVID, that is COVID-19, unraveling the clinical progression of nature's virtuality and perfect biological weapon. A coronavirus disease pandemic has shocked the world and has caused morbidity and mortality on an unprecedented level in the era of modern medicine. Evidence generated to date on the virulence and pathogenicity of severe acute respiratory syndrome suggests that COVID may be considered as a perfect storm caused by nature's virtually perfect biological weapon. This conclusion is supported by an updated analysis of pathogenesis and clinical progression of this infectious disease. Now come towards the MCQ session. First MCQ is, which of the microorganisms pose a serious threat to national security and can be easily transmitted and disseminated, resulting in high mortality, may cause public panic, or require special action plan for public health preparedness according to CDC classification. First is Salmonella species, second is Bacillus anthracis, C. brucellosis, and D. Clostridium perfringens. Option B is the right one. Bacillus anthracis is the one. Second MCQ is the long-term health effects reported 2 to 6 years later after nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 due to nuclear radiation damages are: option A, skin burns; option B, chromosomal damage; option C, leukemia; and option D, deafness.
C.
C.
Yes,
Charlie.
option C is the right one. Leukemia is death. Third MCQ is, according to US Center for Disease Control, the infectious agents like HIV, which is difficult to contract via aerosol, is placed in which biosafety level? Option A, biosafety level 1, option B, level 2, option C is level 3, and option D is level 4.
C.
Option D is the right one. The recent spread of COVID-19 has a vast range of biological hazard. Which of the following measures do you think are of no use to combat COVID-19? Option A, ventilation of rooms. Option B, less crowding. Option C, movement of people. And option D, wearing face mask.
C.
Yes, this
Charlie.
is the right one. Fifth MCQ is, during transportation of petroleum oil, due to negligence of staff, a vast amount of oil is spilled in the ocean. What hazards this oil spillage can cause? Option A, it destroys the insulating ability of fur-bearing mammal. Option B, it sinks in the ocean bed and affects marine life. Option C, it evaporates quickly, doesn't affect marine life. And option D, that it does not float on water surface.
Beta.
Alpha.
Yes, A is the right answer. It destroys the insulating ability of fur-bearing mammals. Sixth MCQ is chemical incidents can occur as a result of natural events or as the result of accidental or intentional events. Which one of the following measure is not considered as a risk reduction for industrial disaster? Option A is the storage capacity of toxic substances should be restricted. Option B is pollution dispersion method in the industries should be strengthened. Option C is densely populated areas should be in the vicinity of industrial areas. And option D is fire warming and handling should be improved.
A.
Option C is the right one. Densely populated areas should not be in the vicinity of industrial areas. Seventh MCQ is high hazard equipments may contain which of the following? A is pathogen, B radioactive material, C non-radioactive substances, and corrosive substances is D. Now you have to choose the correct answer from the options given below. Option A is A, B, and D only. Option B is A, B, C, and D. Option C is B and D only, and option D is A, B, and C.
Alpha.
Yes, option A is the right one. A, B, and D only. This is the right answer. Eighth MCQ is the devastating effects caused by an enormous spread of a certain kind of living organism that may spread disease. The epidemic spread shows a disaster that option A affects many people in the given area or community. B, that it affects many people in the entire world. Option C, that it affects many people in at least two areas of world. And option D, it affects many people in the given continent at least. Option A is the right one. In a given area or community shows epidemic spread. Ninth MCQ is according to Center of Disease Control CDC classification of bioagents, smallpox is placed in category A because option A, that it can pose a potential risk to national security. B, that it moderately easy to disseminate. C, that it requires no plan for public health preparedness. And option D, that it is eradicated from world.
D.
Option A is the right one. It can pose a potential risk to national security. 10th MCQ is anthrax may be attractive to terrorists to use as a bioweapon. Why anthrax is considered as the most dangerous weapon to be used by the terrorist? Option A is rapid person-to-person contamination. B is spores are odorless and tasteless. And C, spores last only for few hours. And option D is no vaccines and medications are available for this.
D.
Yes, option B is the right one. It is the most dangerous because spores are odorless and tasteless. This is the key. These are the references. This is the YouTube link of our channel, and thank you.